So I'm going to speak to possible adaptations of the farm management plan. One of the things that we heard from Bruce this morning when he was talking to us is the fact that, one of the intents of the farm management plan is to perhaps use it for certification purposes. And so when the farm management plans were put together, they are actually put together with the intent that parts and pieces could be pulled out of them so that they can be used to demonstrate certification. So what I've done for the purpose of my presentation is I've looked at the farm management plan in relation to some of the requirements for the Canadian organic aquaculture standards. So that just to give you an example of how the farm management plan can be used to help you achieve the level of documentation and achieve the level of professionalism that would be required to attain a standard. But first, what I wanted to talk about is just touch on what we heard from Jenny already, and the fact that we know seafood certification exists. Why do producers do it? Why do they go there? Different things, different reasons, depending on what you want to gain from your certification. So it may simply be that you want to gain market acceptance. It may be that you want to increase your market penetration. It may be that you want community acceptance. It may be that you're seeking a price premium. And again, as Jenny explained, most certification regimes are met by abiding with a set of standards that will dictate, they can dictate minimum operating or outcome requirements, or they may dictate principles that you have to abide by. So it really all depends on which certification regime you're trying to meet. But most do require documentation, and on the farm documentation, again, this depends on the regime that you're trying to follow, but most will require on the farm documentation to demonstrate that you're planning to meet the outcomes and also that you're adhering to minimum requirements. So what I'm going to talk about today, as I mentioned, is to demonstrate how aspects of the farm management plan can be used to fulfill some of the requirements for seafood certification schemes. I'm going to use organic certification as an example because that's the certification standard that I have the most depth of knowledge in. So what is organic certification? It is a certification scheme that can be applied to aquaculture products that can allow product differentiation on the marketplace. It can allow the targeting of some niches that are already existing, and it can, in some instances, allow you to obtain a premium for your product. We've already heard that organic is well recognized, and it's recognized internationally, and U.S. is actually the largest market for organic food internationally, and the pie chart shown on this slide shows you that more than 40% of the market for organic products is actually our neighbor to the south, which is the USA. So although Europe combined is also a large proportion of the market for organic products, the largest one is in the USA. And the bar graph simply demonstrates the growth in the industry over 10 years. And with the green bars representing the scale of the industry in terms of sales in US dollars and billions, and the blue bars representing what the percentage of growth is. So what's interesting is that although growth has been positive, even through 08, 09, and 10, when we had market crashes, when we typically had declines in sizes of markets and things like that, the organic market continued to grow, and that trend is something that we continue to see today. The other thing that's important to know about organic certification is that it's regulated in Canada, the US, as well as the EU. And what that means is that legally you are not allowed to put the word organic on a product unless you have been third-party certified. So organic truly means that you are abiding by a standard. You can't use that terminology in the description of your company or in the description of your product unless you have had third-party certification. So I've also indicated what organic certification means, and I'll just read off the blurb. Organic aquaculture production is a holistic system designed to optimize the productivity and fitness of diverse communities within the aquatic ecosystem. including benthic organisms, seaweeds, aquatic plants, aquaculture, animals, and people. The principal goal of organic aquaculture production is to develop enterprises that are sustainable and harmonious with the environment. So that's a pretty broad description, but that is essentially the basis for the Canadian organic standards. So how can, and when I talk about the organic standards, what I'm talking to specifically is I'm talking about the Canadian Organic Aquaculture Standards, which was published in 2012, which is available from the Canadian Standards Board. But just to be clear, that's what I'm speaking of. There are several other organic standards that are out there that Canadians could get certified to. Canadians can get certified to organic aquaculture standards from Europe, for example, if they choose to, but this is the organic standard that I'm talking about. It's the one that is listed on the Canadian Standards website. So the point that I'm going to make in my talk today is that both the Farm Management Plan as well as the Canadian Organic Standard, and I'm going to use acronyms because otherwise I'm going to be using too much words. So FMP for Farm Management Plan, OAS for the Canadian Organic Aquaculture Standards. Both of them require some measure of documentation, and this documentation is in terms of having management plans in place and is in terms of record keeping. So producers, you know what the farm management plan looks like now. You should have had one in place since October, and you know that's what it's all about. It's about having management plans and about doing some record keeping to demonstrate that you've upheld those management plans. So there are common elements between the two, so that what a producer should consider is that elements of the farm management plan can be used to support the fact that they are attaining a certification, or elements of things that you put together to achieve a certification can be used for your farm management plan. And that's ultimately the intent. The intent is that you can use those things interchangeably, and that's how the farm management plan was constructed. You can pull things in from elsewhere. And similarly, certification bodies, you don't have to produce plans specifically for a certification body. You just have to demonstrate evidence that you're doing things in a certain way. So you can pull management plans from your operating principles. You can pull it from the provincial farm management plan, for example, to demonstrate that you're meeting these outcomes for the certification scheme. Now, one thing that I thought I should make clear is that I'm not a representative of the provincial government, nor am I a representative of the Canadian Standards Board. So just to be clear on that. And the other thing that I wanted to state is in this presentation, I am paraphrasing things from either the Farm Management Plan or the Canadian Organic Standards. So somebody who is trying to either meet the requirements of the Farm Management Plan and the Organic Standards need to go to those resource documents. Don't take my wording. Go to the original document. So because I'm using some paraphrasing, so I can be a little more clear, I guess, with respect to my language and take out some of the wordiness. So essentially what I did for this presentation is I crawled through the Farm Management Plan and I crawled through the Organic Standards, and I said, how do these different aspects meet up with what would be required one for the other? So Farm Management Plan, first section, asks you for general information on your farm. Well, this is certainly going to be something that you're going to require for your organic plan. You have to describe your farm. You can use what's required in your farm management plan for your general information for your organic plan. Second part of your farm management plan is you would have to explain your production plan. Well, this fits in perfectly with respect to describing one of the requirements for an organic plan, which is that you have to produce documents to provide details concerning the inputs and the details of the use, production, processing, handling, and transport of organic products. So what you provide in your production plan shows this is what I'm putting in, this is my cultivation method, this is where I'm taking out. So it's a very good description of the process, which can meet one of the requirements of the organic standard. Second part of your farm management plan is your site plan. So you have to draw your site within your farm management plan. Well, a requirement of the organic standard is for you to provide a master site plan so that you can demonstrate certain aspects of the standard like contamination, potential sources of contamination from other sources, demonstrate that you have buffer zones. So you can actually create a site plan that meets both requirements of your farm management plan as well as the organic standards. So again, dual purpose for one drawing. The next piece of the farm management plan, section 2.3, has to do with production reporting. And within the farm management plan, it's clear that you have to annually report your production levels. And also you have to be able to give a report on your estimated inventory levels at any time the province asks you. Well, part of the requirements for the organic aquaculture standards is to have traceability of your inputs and traceability of your outputs. So if you're going to need to be able to determine your inventory levels for your products, obviously you're going to need to know your inputs and your outputs. So again, those two are things that are very similar with respect to what the requirements are, and one can be used for the other. Within the farm management plan in section 4, you're asked to describe your process flow using a flow diagram. Again, this can meet the requirement of the organic aquaculture standard to provide a document concerning the details of your inputs and how you produce your product. So this is a very good way to provide that requirement for the organic aquaculture standard. In the farm management plan, the next section asks you to describe your equipment and your infrastructure. Well, part of the organic standard requires you to prove that your design maximizes the welfare and minimizes the stress in the animals. You can write your farm description for the farm management plan such that you answer to this question for the organic aquaculture standard again. So again, so that you're not duplicating, you're using one for the other. Section 6.1 of the farm management plan asks you to or refers to shellfish husbandry practices and procedures that are used to cultivate shellfish in a manner that promotes health of shellfish and success of the farm. This is a section of the farm management plan that is currently not very large, at the moment, but if somebody chose to fill in the section with more, they could, or in the future there may be more requirements here. And this section can be used to demonstrate that you're meeting the compliance requirement 6.5 of the organic aquaculture standard, which is proof that your management of your site maximizes the welfare and minimizes the stress of the animals. So there's even wording there that's very similar between the two. Section 6.1.1 of the farm management plan asks for a description of management of interactions with wildlife. Section 6.6 of the organic aquaculture standards asks you for an integrated predator deterrence plan, which is very similar. And this is something that that would be required for the organic aquaculture standard, but would also meet the farm management plan requirements. Shellfish health monitoring is another piece of the farm management plan, and this is something that would have to be described in an organic plan as well. Specifically, you have to describe how diseases will be prevented, diagnosed, and treated. You have to describe how you're going to do routine examinations to detect disease. You're going to have to identify how you're going to identify causes of outbreaks. So any degree of shellfish monitoring that you've described in your farm management plan will also apply to your organic plan. And similarly, with respect to pieces of your farm management plan that relate to biosecurity, general health emergency measures, and risk control for shellfish management, all of these pieces, again, currently right now within the shellfish plan are not very large, but may enlarge in the future, will meet the requirements for the organic aquaculture standard, where they talk about, they don't use the term biosecurity, but they talk about proper cleaning, they talk about hygienic routines, and they talk about management practices to prevent cause and future outbreak. So essentially, both plans are asking for the same thing, they're just using a little bit different terminology. We talked already earlier about aspects of farm operations within farm management plans. Specifically, quite an extensive part of the farm management plan has to do with waste management, and it requests site-specific waste management plans. And the organic aquaculture standard also asks you to describe your waste management plan. So with some specific minimum requirements, but regardless, again, meeting the requirements of one will also meet the requirements of the other, so it can prove a dual purpose. Similarly, within the farm operations section of the farm management plan, you are required to describe how you will store and dispose of your supplies, and with the intent to prevent contamination of your surroundings, okay? As one of the intents, well, in the organic aquaculture standard, you have to demonstrate that you're going to prevent contamination of product. You have to also demonstrate, again, waste management, so again, one serves the purposes of the other. Within the farm management plan, you have to indicate what you're going to do with accumulated refuse and decommissioned farm equipment. In the organic aquaculture standards, you have to demonstrate that you have a means to deal with retired equipment, specifically that it's going to be used or recycled where possible. So again, farm management plan can answer that question in the organic aquaculture standards. In the farm management plan, within the piece of the farm management plan that talks about maintaining the site in good order, there's a specific question that refers to means for ensuring your markers on your site are maintained. This is actually a requirement within the organic aquaculture standard that you demonstrate that your aquaculture sites are well marked. So with respect to environmental monitoring, there is a piece in there on within the farm management plan about environmental monitoring, but it is acknowledged that currently for shellfish this is under development. But as it develops, it can be used to promote or to provide information for the organic aquaculture standard, where there's a requirement to detail the environmental effects of the operation. There's also a requirement to demonstrate that the sediment buildup doesn't exceed the assimilation capacity of the environment. And the interesting thing is now the current position of the province of Nova Scotia is that they don't really know how to monitor the environment under shellfish farms, because it's indicated that there isn't a change in sulfide levels beneath the sites. And so that actually could be used to demonstrate for the organic aquaculture standards. You can say, look, this is what my regulator is telling me. There's little to no impact underneath my farm. I've met this requirement of the standard. The record keeping for the province farm management plan is a requirement of 7 years. For the organic aquaculture standards, you have to maintain them for 5 years. So if you're keeping your records for that long, at least you can keep them, for example, for both purposes. So one thing that I want to confer to you, I've gone through a lot of similarities between aspects of the farm management plan and the Canadian organic standards that are similar, but I want to impress upon you that what happens when a certifying body comes in and looks at your operation is they don't necessarily, or they will not expect you to produce documents specifically for their certification regime. They're perfectly happy to accept documents that you've put together for other purposes. You just have to put together the documentation that demonstrates that you are complying with their minimum requirements. So any management plans that you have in place can be used to support your certification. So when we talk about the farm management plan, you have to do it for regulation purposes, but that can also meet your certification standard. You don't have to do things twice. So you can do things for 2 reasons. So ultimately, as I mentioned, there are many similarities between the farm management plan and the organic aquaculture standards. Other certification standards can have different requirements, but many of them are very similar to what you're being requested in your farm management plan. They may have different minimum outcomes that you're required to meet, but ultimately at the end of the day, your provincially required farm management plan can be used as supporting evidence to meet certification standard. And as I mentioned, that documentation doesn't have to be created specifically for the certification. So you can use the FMP. And not only that, isn't that great that how credible that information is that you're providing to your certification standard when it's your provincial regulator that is reviewing you to make sure that what you're doing is not only correct, but that you're actually complying with what you're saying you're doing. So you have an extra level of comfort to the certifying body to make sure that you're complying with their minimum requirements.
And the independent audit is a separate government agency.
It wouldn't be a government agency, it would be a third party.
No, I'm talking about the independent audit
Right.
for the fire management plan.
That's right.
Is another government agency.
Yeah. Nova Scotia Environment.
Environment, yeah.
Yeah.
So they do the audit. Fisheries comes up with the regs, they do the audit. So when somebody like organic comes in, well, okay, you've got independent verification of what you're saying you're doing.
Yep,
Cool.
and organic isn't only that way. Like if you look at BAP certification, you can actually go online and look at audits that have been done of companies. You know, if they need a judgment, they will often go back to the regulator and see what the regulator said. You know, they'll often do that if you want to meet the standard, or if you want to, for example, apply for not meeting the BAP requirement. There are some things that you may say may not apply because of site specificity or because of location. If you can demonstrate that you're meeting your regulatory requirements, you can often get a variance on what the certification standard says. So because it's recognized that your regulator is doing things according to your location, whereas the BAP standard is global, so it's not necessarily going to meet the needs of your local environment, but your provincial body will be. So, you know, there are tremendous advantages to having the oversight that we now have with respect to operations. So.
And I wonder too if that would be a good piece of information again for the scoping project, where we show the people like those are the standard for being recognized as organic certified in Canada, and what the farmer have to demonstrate right now with the farm management plan is as rigorous as pretty much what they need to do.
Well, certainly the farm management plan was always envisioned as being a big part of the scoping project. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, it is a regulatory requirement. It's there. It talks about running good operations in accordance with published regulations by the province of Nova Scotia.
It's not
So
only-
that was always part of it. My bigger question, I think this is a bigger question, is that think about, so I know that there was work done on getting organic certification a few years ago. But think about, why isn't there a way, because you're right, I mean, if there's all those similarities, so what's missing? What's missing from the farm management plan that the organic agencies would look for, and so Canadian organic certification, regardless of a stamp or no stamp, that the Nova Scotia aquaculture industry can apply for, the shellfish industry, can apply for organic certification
As a blanket.
as a blanket.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just ANS members, because the regs are bigger than ANS members, but if it was a coordinated effort, why couldn't a coordinated effort say that if there's a couple of little tweaks that individual farmers got to make because there's something missing, it's better than starting all over from scratch. Why can't there be like a blanket organic, Nova Scotia is organic shellfish.
Well, and I think what
Isn't that cool?
you don't want your regulator to have to be following a certification standard, right? Because then, so you don't want that to happen, but what you want to have happen is that there be, that they be similar.
Yeah.
Okay, so that your provincial, because again, your provincial regulator is according to provincial requirements.
Sure.
But I think what would be useful is to, the term gap analysis or whatever you want to
Yeah.
use,
What's
determine
missing?
the gap between, if you have a farm management plan for the province of Nova Scotia, what else do you have to do to meet?
Yeah.
And I'd even say, not just organic, but maybe BAP, maybe, you know, to do that piece, what extra steps do you have to do to do that piece? And I think that there would be tremendous value in that because, you know, not everybody, many companies are looking for one management plan.
Yeah.
They don't want to have a BAP plan. They don't want to have a provincial plan. They just want a company farm management plan. And so, you know, that would be great to know what that gap needs to be able to meet most requirements. So, because there's no reason your farm management plan can't go above and beyond what's requested, right?
Well,
if you want to meet
that's
the
right.
standard.
I mean, oh yeah, I mean, but that's the whole point of this exercise, is that your farm management plan is a tool.
Right, that's
So,
right.
I mean, anyway, I'm halfway through that thing and I'm going, okay, wait a minute, this could be cool. Because
Yes.
think about Nova Scotia shellfish, or, well, certainly Nova Scotia shellfish being recognized as organic, just organic. I don't know where that came from, but anyway.
I don't know, I like it.
Aquatic, I don't know, anyway, organic. That would be good for everybody. It'd be good
Agreed.
anyway. Okay.